So far we've seen two ways of setting up C++ programs. One was using the command line, and I don't expect many people to do this. Actually, if nobody does this, that's fine. Eclipse, of course, that's probably the preferred way to write C++ programs for this course. We saw one way of setting up a simple C++ program using one of the wizards that you can use to set up C++ programs. It turns out that's got a slight problem, and so I don't expect you to be able to do that, but if you can, that's great. So this is the next thing I'm going to show you is how to maybe the easiest way to set up a C++ program in Eclipse. So you go to if you're not in the C++ perspective yet, switch to the C++ perspective, and in Project Explorer, do a right click, or on the Mac, control click, new C++ project, and choose this, Hello World C++ project. So I'm gonna call this Hello. If you have a project already with that name, of course you should use a different name. Okay, so I'm gonna say Hello. Click on next, I put in my name, put in a copyright notice, doesn't matter what it is. This is probably just for your own purposes. You don't need to have anything that's important in here. The important one thing that you want to pay attention to is that when you use this wizard, once again, this is under executable Hello World C++ project. You get this when you say new C++ project and choose this. Okay, and you get some basic settings: author, copyright notice, greeting. This is what gets printed out. But notice here the very last thing is it sets up a source folder, which is extremely useful, and this is probably the way to go to have a source folder. Now, if you're used to Java, if you're used to using Eclipse to write Java programs, you will have seen this already. So by default, you do get a source folder. Okay. In the next page, if you're hitting the next button, you'll see a bunch of these dialogues, and you will see an option to have debug or release. For this course, we can stick with just debug. It's good to have the release, doesn't hurt, doesn't matter. What is the difference, you might ask? Well, debug creates executables that are slightly larger. It has more information that can be used by a debugger. And in Eclipse, we use the Eclipse debugger, or if you're using the command line, you can use the GNU or new debugger. And so it has a little bit more information about the executables and about other files, so that you can use the debugger to find out variables, contents of variables, and so on. The release version of any code does not have this information. Also, often release versions are optimized for speed, so not only are they smaller, they might even be faster. That said, do we need release versions? Probably not. I'm guessing we'll do everything for this course in debug mode. And there are advanced settings. You can explore all these. These are all good things to explore. So, okay, you might see temporarily some errors. They just went away. So you might temporarily see some error messages. They go away. If they don't go away, all is not lost. You might still be able to have a workable system. I've seen this problem in some situations where you get error messages and they're not supposed to be there, and it's not necessarily your program. Okay, so if let's say everything's working, or if you get error messages, you can still let's see if things will work. You see the same kinds of things that we saw in our simple program earlier. Found include IOStream. This allows you to use cout to put things out to the console or the terminal. And in Eclipse, you will see a console pane. So, oops, I just maximized it by double-clicking it. So if you see a console pane, that's where things will get printed out, like this hello world message. These two things together import IOStream capabilities. So there is a library that we will use called IOStream. We'll use many libraries. This is just one of them. And we will use this namespace standard. What is namespace? We'll talk about that in more detail later. So right now, just assume that these two statements together give you essentially the same features as a Java import. You're importing things from outside this program. Okay, now you have an int main and you have a cout, you have the insertion operator, put out the string and then a new line. You've seen this before, I hope. Okay, so here's where you need to figure out whether your Eclipse system will work. You need to click on the build icon, and this will build a debug version of this project hello. So you click on that. If all of this works, you get something like this. You get a bunch of output, something like this. We use the make utility, which we will explore in more detail later. And you get essentially a command that looks a lot like what we typed, only a lot more complicated. If you see this kind of messages in your console, then you're good to go. You can write C++ programs, no problem. If you do not see this and instead you see an error message saying something like make not found, then you have some configuration issues to solve. And I will gladly help you with this. If you're using the Linux Live DVD, all of this stuff should work. It should be able to compile your C program, your Hello World C++ program. Should be able to create an executable and all of that. If you're using Mac OS X, you can set up your system to do all of this. You need to download the Xcode download for developers, something like that, and you will be able to compile C++ programs. If you're using Windows, that's a different story, and I do not recommend using Windows for this course. You can do similar things with Visual Studio, but there are a lot of problems with Visual Studio's version of C++. So even though I do use Visual Studios for certain tasks, for this course I highly recommend that you use Linux or Mac OS X and use Eclipse. That's my recommendation for everybody in this course. If you really want to use Visual Studio, you can do that on your own, but for this course, everything you turn in, you want to use Eclipse. Use Visual Studio to write your code, make sure it works in Eclipse, and then submit it. Because I'm not going to be checking code on Visual Studio. That's one of the problems. So I use it, but not for this course. Okay. So that said, let's take a look inside and see what's in there. We have a binary folder with this executable. You have a folder of includes. This is just all of the things that you need from the C libraries, all the pound includes, and this will be different on Linux, but something similar. And then finally, it should create a source folder. Now this is important. As you saw in Java, you need a source folder is nice to have because all your sources in one place rather than having sources and executables all in one place. This is just a lot more organized. So definitely this is the way to go when you write C programs. Just create a hello world C++ program, take out all these statements, put in your own statements. That's probably for the rest of this course. If you can do this step that we just did, we said control new or right click new, C++ project, hello world, give it a name, and you're off and running. So this should be good for the rest of the semester. Okay. So at this point, you're ready to run. We haven't actually run this yet. All you did was build it, and the build finished. And then if you click on this, oops. Alright, let me try that again. You might have to click on the right thing. I clicked on a lot of stuff. Alright, let's try this again. Run hello. Nope. Alright. If you do run into this problem, we do have an executable. For some reason, it's not finding it. That's not working either. Let's try control click. Run as local C++ application, and that worked. So you might run into this problem if you do get that error message saying something's not found. It actually is there, and I will take a look and see why this is not working. I believe you can go into either binaries or debug, click on the thing that you want to run, which should be there should be just one executable. Control run as local C++ application, and it works. Okay, so some minor problems, but I think those are not a big deal. Let's see, once you run it, will it work? It does. Okay, so now it decides to work. So now that I ran it once using the executable, now when I click hello and choose run, it will check if I need to compile anything. If not, it will just run the program, and everything works. Okay, so this is all you need to run C++ programs. Use the hello world wizard using right-click new C++ project. Under executable, use hello world, give it a name, and create this simple project with a hello or whatever you name it .cpp. Take out what's in there by default, put in your own statements, and you're off and running. This will create a single project for each program that you want to set up. So if you want to do something slightly different, that is, if you want multiple main programs in a single source directory, well, that can be done, and I can go over that with you, but the way Eclipse is set up, it's not so easy to do. It takes a little bit of work with makefiles and so on. So if you're willing to do that, I can definitely show you how to do that so that you can have multiple main programs in one project under the source folder. That is certainly possible, but for now, let's just assume that every time you want to run a program, you set up a whole new project, a Hello World C++ project, you get a CPP file or any number of CPP files, edit them, create one executable, and then you're off and running. Okay.